here we have the presentation by Gary Visscher, and of course it's the lessons learned about safety culture from some of these investigations. So I'll just go over his PowerPoint slides, and then of course ask you guys to think about questions that these may trigger. These are some observations and lessons about the safety culture from the investigations from the Chemical Safety Board. Legal and regulatory developments and directions related to safety culture. If you've read some of these press releases and some of these reports, you see how a lot of them conclude that the safety culture of this organization or that organization was woefully lacking, and so on and so forth, and they need to change. The Chemical Safety Board, of course, does not enforce any kind of regulations. They're an objective group that goes in and they investigate the tragedies or investigate the incidents, and the focus here, of course, which is reflected in their name, would be the chemical accidents that involve death, serious injuries, and so on and so forth. I think somebody is making some suggestions in the mining industry that there be some kind of group similar to National Transportation Safety Board, Chemical Safety Board, that would come in and do some of these investigations and so on and so forth. So, kind of an interesting thought. Lessons learned from the BP refinery explosion and fire, which Tom talked about. In terms of procedures, maintenance, organizational commitment, and culture. And of course, I think when these things happen to these large companies like this, we just kind of scratch our head. But just because you're big and powerful and have a lot of resources and so forth doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing the right thing or even know what to do. And I think that must be the case. The Imperial Sugar Company was the second one. One I'm not really familiar with. The lessons learned here: management of change, and then just basic hazard awareness, which every safety professional recognizes as the most basic, first base, rudimentary type of a thing that we have safety awareness, or we teach safety awareness, or we preach safety awareness, and then we also show people what to be aware of, what the hazards are, hazard recognition, so on and so forth. And T2 here, training and education in process safety. And of course that always comes up, process safety, when you're dealing with these complex refineries, and we're dealing with these NASA and so on and so forth, process safety. I'm right now the president of the Central Pennsylvania Safety Association, and most of those folks in there are general industry folks that my colleagues there, and we have a conference as well every year at Penn State, and it's interesting how often the topic of process safety, we always have that process safety, and that's a real big topic, of course, and one that really, maybe the mining industry might benefit from more insight or more competency in process safety. Well understood safe operating parameters here. Okay, so obviously that must have been the sugar explosion, so on and so forth. Some of these other incidents too you've heard of, dust, right? Organic dust. I know OSHA has really been involved in that lately with the dust and so forth. And things like granaries and flour mills, whatever. I think a lot of times those people, they just don't, maybe have an appreciation, for the potential for the disaster. If you're not dealing with something like solid rocket fuel or something like that. Regulation of safety culture and management. A lot of stuff comes out of Europe here. Tom mentioned about Chernobyl and the first time that safety culture was used as a concept and so on and so forth. But the European requirements for safety culture assessment in offshore drilling, the NRC, the National Regulatory Commission report, and safety culture policy statement, being two pieces of policy or legislation here. And then, of course, we all know the proposed changes coming in mining. Both MSHA and OSHA currently list safety and health programs regulation on their regulatory agenda. And some great comments here from Mr. Michaels. He's the new, the latest director here of Assistant Secretary of OSHA. Says this regulation, and he refers to it as, I guess, I2P2, represents fundamental change in how employers think about worker safety. So here, talking about a change. Instead of waiting for government inspection or a workplace tragedy to address workplace hazard, which would be a totally reactive type of a thing, employers would be required to develop a plan to find all the safety and health hazards in the facilities that might injure or kill workers and then fix those hazards. So addressing the idea of a plan and so being proactive sounds like good stuff. Here we have the Joe Main quote, despite requirements of the Mine Act, statistics on health and safety violations indicate that more mine operators are not being proactive. Kind of the same old thing, we're being reactive and not proactive. More than 102,000 citations and orders were issued in coal mines in 2009, 35,500 for 2005. Similarly, in metal mines, more than 72,000 citations were ordered or issued in 2009, up from 13,005. That's a huge, huge increase there. We believe that this trend is going in the wrong direction, tells us that some companies are failing to implement systems that are necessary to comply with the Mine Act. Mine operators must implement effective safety and health management programs. So, a safety and health program rule, is it a long overdue improvement in safety practices, or is it something that we already have and we just need to tweak it? I read some articles that say, hey, don't throw out your culture, build on the culture you have. Look at the culture you have as being a strength and something that you can build on. So that's something maybe to ponder. An enforcement tool to jack up the number of citations and increase liability under the Miner Act. A fundamental shift in regulatory policy. We all have to make our decision on that as to what exactly this means and what it is. And of course, perception is a lot of it, how we perceive these things and what our experience have been and so on and so forth. Some examples here given by Mr. Visscher. OSHA's Voluntary Protection Program and the 89 Safety and Health Management Guidelines. This is what MSHA cites as being, examples here of good programs. How many of you are familiar with VPP at all? Okay, a lot of you are familiar with that. The ANSI /AIHA Z10 standard, Occupational Health and Safety Management Systems, the ISO 9001, Quality Management, BSI OHSAS, Occupational Health and Safety Management System. So all these initiatives here, and they really all basically come from rulemaking or regulatory agencies and organizations, all kind of addressing this idea of safety management and so on and so forth. A safety and health program requirement, what are we talking about? September 9th, federal regulation announcement, MSHA stated the components of an effective program generally include what? Well, management commitment. We all have heard that for many, many years. We have to have management commitment, and it's true. Worker involvement. We have to have worker involvement, and that's an interesting one. How effective are we in really getting the worker involvement? Because of participative management, participative work, and so on and so forth. People have talked about that for many years, and you just wonder, how much progress we're really making in that. Workers really need, if they're going to find meaning in their work, to have say over important decisions that affect their work. And sometimes people are reluctant to give them the control. And, but that's an interesting thing to ponder. It's the paradox. The more control I'm willing to give up, actually maybe the more control I get. But people, that's a hard lesson. Hazard identification, including workplace inspections for violations of mandatory health and safety standards. Obviously, that's a basic type of a thing. That's something we're working on now with our Brookwood Sago. We're working on workplace examinations and pre-shift examinations and trying to put together some videos and materials for an exemplary type of a program. Well, we don't think it's going to be, save the world or anything, but maybe it'll nudge some people and help some people, particularly that are new when it comes to workplace examinations and pre-shift, and send a good message of how important those things are. Hazard prevention and control, safety and health training, program evaluation. So I think maybe that's another one we're pretty weak on, program evaluation. Number one, it's hard to do. Number two, a lot of people don't know how to do it, and a lot of times we have to rely on outside consultants, to really do good program evaluation. At least that's my opinion. Issues, flexibility versus certainty. Ideas about grandfathering, incentive programs, regulate hazards for which no standard exists. We've been down that road before with the ergonomics and the chemical exposures and so on and so forth. But remember the general duty clause really covers, a lot of that. Any OSHA inspector can come in and they can cite anybody, for a hazard. It doesn't have to be in the regulations at all. It doesn't have to be in 1910 or 1926. Enforcement, how equipped will inspectors be, how equipped will inspectors be in their evaluation of the effectiveness of programs and management? That's a good one. We have to kind of chuckle a little bit, as trainers that maybe have a lot of experience. Sometimes we get evaluated by inspectors on our training, and people who've never done any training at all, but maybe they're just looking at a form and they're just going down there and evaluating people. So I think that's a very valid thought, very good question that's being posed there. Will it result in double counting of violations? Will it lead to more unwarrantable failure and individual citations? Getting into some pretty serious stuff there. Is there room for meaningful efforts to promote safety culture in mining when the current focus in mine safety is so much on rule compliance and enforcement? Is there enough room in the room, I guess, for those two? Will promotion of safety culture in mining become just another avenue for conflict between mine officials and MSHA? And that's Gary's presentation, so I hope you have some good questions that can be interjected later on in the panel.
Gary and I had discussed this subject quite a bit, and of course, Gary put down a long list of health and safety management systems that are out there. The Deepwater Horizon accident resulted in two major events. One was the breakup of mineral management service into 3 different groups. And the second one was a passage of a new law or regulation forcing a management of health and safety system, what they call SEMS. So OSHA and MSHA are engaged in rulemaking in the process, whereas Mineral Management Service, or the new agency, has what they call SEMS, Safety and Environmental Management System, and they want every operator to develop a safety and environmental management system based upon API's RP75, which is another one of those general management systems, how you develop these for improving health and safety in organizations. Any case, please, if you have any questions, Gary has raised 2 very interesting questions in the end, particularly ability of government agencies to enforce some of these. At this time, I will have Ron Witt talk a little bit about some of the things he does in his training program. He has been a trainer for over 25 years in the mining industry. He's a MSHA and OSHA certified trainer. and he has been a part of Penn State Minor Training Program for some years. Ron?
I'm always honored to be asked to participate in any kind of training and things like that. It's a, well, it's what it is. It's an honor. To be asked to speak after the people we've had so far this morning, I knew I had to at least get a tie on to try to bring myself up to their standards, because the rest of this is going to probably be downhill. I was asked to kind of give you the kind of connection to in the field, in the kind of boots kind of perspective. A lot of the things that are going to be talked about today are the richness of what we've been learning from, obviously, catastrophes, but it's not all been from catastrophes. There is a movement for continued improvement. We've heard those words back in the 80s. But it's been kind of carried on a life of its own. For me, most of my work is in the field. I have to connect to people who are going to do the things that we're all talking about. And so this quick part of the presentation today is kind of give you a feel for that. With all we do know about safety, why do we have the same accidents every year? I mean, it sounds like a question that's been asked endlessly, yet I don't know that anybody's ever really talked to people about it. Why do we have the same accidents every year? Is it inevitable? If you do the same work, we're just locked into having the same accidents, or what are those pieces to that? This has been a central theme of my training for a long time. I learned this many years ago when I was working for Penn State, when I was a consultant, when I was doing my OSHA, MSHA kind of thing. The lessons I learned were real. I'd had people from my training classes that were killed. I had talked to them not too very long ago, sometimes within a week or so. And I knew everything I said was right, at least I thought everything I said was right. I'd learned a lot of things, and yet, and to make it worse, it was the same kind of the fatalogram that they would use for that person's fatal accident, they would use next year. They didn't even have to draw a new one. It was the same exact thing. And that began, for me, an understanding of trying, or a pursuit of trying to understand, why is that? I had never heard anybody explain it adequately, at least to me. We all know there are many approaches to safety, and you've heard many of them this morning. There's, a million of them out there. How effective you are depends obviously on what you consider to be a success. What are successes for safety? Well, is it compliance? Is it MSHA, OSHA compliance? Is it getting the rules down? Well, we've heard some great presentations this morning about what those pieces are like and what the gaps are between it. Is it not getting hurt? Is that the success? And I'll talk just briefly about that, because that was a big part of the culture of safety that I had to work within. Or is it prevention? The problem for me with prevention is, what are you trying to prevent? Again, rules being broken, people getting injured. Where's your prevention focus? What is it on? And what I tend to see is, I see a kind of a ongoing chase of the same things. Many safety cultures have and continue to base their measurements of success on low or zero injuries. That was one of the things that kind of trapped me in the culture that I was working in not too very long ago. I worked for a construction company, about 2,600 employees, Mid-Atlantic region, and the culture of safety that we were working within came out with a theme. Most companies have them. Some visual way of looking at how safety really is going to be kind of focused. And our theme was home safe tonight. Is that, you know, like a theme you would like kind of get behind? Sounds great. It was horrible when I heard it. I, in fact, made an effort at getting them to reconsider. And they couldn't understand why. And it was because I was already engaged in our safety culture with a battle that continues, in my opinion, with most companies. The battle between injuries and prevention. Injuries. 0 injuries. 0 fatalities. I could spend all day talking about just those 2 concepts, but the bottom line was, in our culture, they knew what we measured. And what we measured was whether people got hurt or not. That became a big problem for me because when people didn't get hurt, what was management? Satisfied. That brings up a couple of interesting questions. Again, this 0 injury business is based traditionally because injuries are traumatic and emotional, they're visual, they're reportable to MSHA and OSHA, so you got to hire people to make sure that that process gets taken care of, and they're costly beyond the event. If you have a car accident, when does the car continue to generate loss? Pretty much ends. What can happen with injuries? They could what? They could go on for how long? This has a lot of people's attention, and it should. Not that this isn't important. The problem that I ended up with was, because this focus has limits when employees are asked to engage in accident prevention policies in the workplace. This focus of injuries. For example, I'm sure you've seen the fatalgrams over the years. Here's a typical fatal accident in the mining industry that I see year in and year out. In fact, this one was 06. This one was 07. This one was in 08. 09. And again, 2010. My point is this. When I engage in employees, when I talk to them about the difference between prevention and not getting hurt, they don't always see that they're different. Again, every year the same accidents. When I ask employees, do you drive haul trucks like this? How many people in here have haul trucks like this, for example? Many of you. And I would ask people in a training class, if you have trucks like this, have you ever had accidents like this? 9 times out of 10 they'll say no. No, we don't. We know it could happen, but we don't have accidents like that. And then I ask them why. And they'll begin with a simple, well, because we don't, well, we actually do that. Well, we don't have those accidents because we, and after a few minutes of asking them why they don't have those accidents, they come to the conclusion that they don't know why they don't have those accidents. And my point for them is to get them onto this culture thing we're talking about here. The prevention side of things has very little to do with how hurt you get. And to get that visualized in their mind is the first step from the bottom-up growth that a company needs, not just top-down, but from the bottom up to understand that there's a difference between preventing an accident and not getting hurt. Once employees start to wonder why they haven't had that accident, they're on a path to asking other questions where things become more visible. This is just a small example. It could be a roof fall. It could be a million different things. It works the same way. There are 2 obvious issues here. One is, If no one gets hurt today, did you have a safe day? Well, I could put up a picture of a million different kind of people doing a million different kind of things, all of which haven't gotten hurt today. And if the measurement, like it was in our safety culture, is home safe tonight, I'll tell you what it does. It gets employees to focus on the results of accidents, not their causes. They focus on, hey, if you get hurt, that's what's bad. That's part of the problem with a lot of the cultures, safety cultures, that are in place today. They're not engaging their employees in prevention of stuff. They're engaging them in the measurement of it. And the measurement typically is whether you've been hurt or not. Anybody in here ever been in a car accident? They'll take just 1 second here and then I'll get out of here. I'm sorry, first name? John. Were you killed?
Obviously not.
Why? Why?
Why was I killed?
Why weren't you killed?
It was not a high-speed wreck.
So if you don't have a high-speed crash, you won't be killed, correct?
Not necessarily.
Well, I asked you why, John. Why weren't you killed then?
Fortunate in many ways.
Fortune. So you drive around looking for fortunate circumstance? If you take this to it, and we don't have time for it, but if you take this to its obvious conclusion, I usually do in a training class, and I'll ask people, have you been killed in an accident? Or have you had an accident? And well, yeah, I had. And I ask them, if were you killed? Everybody thinks it's, a silly question, but the reality is, if you keep going down that road, why? Why weren't you killed? And they think about it more and more. They come to a point to where you really don't know why you weren't killed. I mean, there's probably some, Dr. Pegg or some other, genius out there could come up with some mathematical conclusion to it. I'm not going to be able to do that. I can tell you for most of us, what we end up getting to is you weren't killed because you were what? Lucky. If 10 people have a car accident, everything's exactly the same. Will everybody have the same injuries? I call that luck. I don't know what you call it. Maybe there's a better word for it, but in my simple way of looking at things, I call that luck. So in essence, in an accident, injuries are a function of what? Luck. How hurt you get is a function of luck. And it's important for employees to understand in their culture that they're measuring what's a fatal accident. The unluckiest of the unlucky. And yet it's a central theme in everybody's measurement. And what are they focused completely on, unfortunately? Luck. Employees have to engage in that. They have to understand that. And cultures have to push people through that to get to the true measurements that we really need to be looking at. So it's a simplistic view of things. We're short on time. I don't want to get into a lot of different things. And I understand Dr. Romney and the Penn State team's, point of trying to bring in, from the ground up perspectives. How useful it will be for today, we'll find out. But it was a pleasure and an honor being asked. Thank you. So again, do employees know the difference between not getting hurt and preventing an accident? It's really a focus for me with my companies and what I'm doing for them, getting them out of that type of culture where they just measure the luck end. Thank you.